And with a grateful heart, I am welcoming Joelle Cartiel.
To lead volunteers is a very different thing than leading in a normal company. I don't know many, if any one of you had the experience before to lead volunteers inside Toastmasters, outside Toastmasters. I can tell you it's something completely different, but it takes you for life. Fellow Toastmasters, honorable guests on holidays around the world, my name is João Cortial, and I just have passed through a wonderful experience about leading a volunteer team. But let's go back almost a year ago. A big colleague of mine called me and said, João, let's start a new business. Why not do we put our efforts, our knowledge about communication, leadership, we have tons of experience on that. Why not we start something together? And I say, you know what? I'll buy it. And then we passed all the start of 2020, projecting, planning, and just before Carnival, which was in February, we made our first prototype of a workshop for 15 people about feedback, which was one of my favorite themes. It was a high success, but you know what? In March, what happened? Yes, COVID-19. And all the projects were shut down. We had to replan everything. Moving forward, continuing with my track, I had the opportunity to do my DTM project, which is not yet DTM level. I wish I would so. But in this project, I had to lead a team. And why not to take back that project, take back that workshop and make it bigger, make it better? And why not put people to learn more about feedback? I had a meeting with the District 111 Program Quality Director, my area director, and he said, yes, we all agreed to have a workshop about feedback. But make it better, make it bigger. Not 15 people, at least 40 people, 60 people. Wow. Second thing, you have only 2 months to do that. Yes, it was in a hurry. So for 2 months to do so, I need to have a good team from the start. Team that people that I really could count with all my past experience with Toastmasters, but people that really knew what to do in terms of her skills. So for example, I had 3 people only for content, only for putting the agenda on form, to set activities, only for the program itself. 1 person for design, 1 person for IT, so Zoom Master, platform like Eventbrite, certificates, everything that would concern to IT. And 1 more for product management. I had to set a small group to have people to work with me. First station of the day. You volunteer in your organizations. You have people to work with you, not for you. I'm always a servant leader. I like to make people knew they are important, make people knew how can contribute. So my position was, okay, I have already something for us to work with, but you are 100% free to put whatever suggestion you want. And I have to tell you, I mentioned the challenge was to make it bigger. We have before a project with 15 people. Can you imagine how many? 40 people were there. And the results were astonishing. They praised a lot the content, they learned a lot, they thought about, they learned, they knew about feedback. Oh, I'm Toastmaster for 1 to 2 years, I practice every single day that, but still they had many things to do, many things to improve. And that's what I wanted to share with them. So the project was a success. But why, how João Cortial left this project as a better leader? The first one, my lessons learned, the first one, remember, people work with you, not for you. So recognize the participations, recognize, ask them feedback, and put them inside the group to know that what they should do, what they should deliver. The second thing, have someone only to be a project manager. It sounds simple, but it makes a ton of difference to plan things better, to put things on schedule and perspective, what should be prioritized, what should be not, make the agenda go. Remember, 2 months to do everything. And this guy he nailed that. We made a Kanban on a Trello. We knew everything we should do. We scheduled all the meetings we should have with the team. It worked perfectly. But lesson number 2, have always a backup for every single role you have. Remember that guy, project management? He disappeared. On the second meeting, he stopped answering any single message. And yet, compromise our project. We could have our delivery much better. And we had that situation we all know. We start our projects very calmly, things will go smooth, and in the end, you are not in a hurry. But yes, we deliver. And for me, as a servant leader, as I am, as someone that wants to recognize people that work with me, not for me, I really, really went to every single club of them to say thank you, to appreciate their effort, to really share the words for all their colleagues, how important was their participation, how important for them is to making productivity, taking parts of projects inside Toastmasters. Toastmasters is wonderful, you may attest that. So I went to every single club, personally, or sending a video when I could not, sharing a photo of this person to really say thank you, and people get inspired with them, follow their steps. They are leaders in the same way. I'm here to build leaders. I'm not here to have people working for me. I want to have people working with me. That's how we make successful projects. That's how we make the difference within this world. If you know at least this thing from my speech, I'm more than glad to share my words. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Table Topics Master. And for those of you Toastmasters or guests who would have been traveling around the world from this event started, I'm pretty sure if you were dozing off and you were asleep, that you are awake by now. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, there's a lot that we celebrate in the Bahamas when it comes to Christmas. Good food, good fellowship, family, friends, good music, and all of the such. But at this time, it gives me great pleasure as we move into our speaking segment. And we have 3 prepared speakers who are eager and excited to treat you to what it is that they have to say this afternoon. Our first speaker, she's speaking on level 2, a pathways presentation mastery. A time frame is 5 to 7 minutes. Her objectives are simply this: is to deliver a speech with the awareness of the intentional and unintentional practices using her body language. She is a member of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and she is one of our senior administrative assistants as a civilian. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, please welcome our first presenter for today, this afternoon, and to get things rolling, speaking on the topic, a season of celebration, please welcome distinguished Toastmaster Charmaine Goodman Davis.
Good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, fellow Toastmasters. It is certainly my pleasure to be here with you today. A season of celebration. Welcome to the Bahamas. Today, I intend to share with you how a typically traditional Christmas season is here in the Bahamas. Now, Christmas for most of us begins immediately after Thanksgiving, while Thanksgiving may be a grander affair in the US and other countries, it is the significant indication for Bahamians that it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. And so how do we spend the period leading into December 25th itself? Well, first of all, on December 24th, known as Christmas Eve, the majority of us, because we are a Christian nation, find ourselves in a church or in some environment where there is prayer, there is meditation, there is giving alms, there is celebrating the real reason for the season. And so we go to the church of our choice, we share with our fellow parishioners, we read scriptures, and we have a really uplifting, happy occasion to celebrate, which is for us, the birth of Jesus Christ. And so we spend those hours leading into Christmas appreciating that this Christ child was born to save our sins. And we make no exceptions when it comes to worshiping here in the Bahamas at Christmas time, as well as other times throughout the year. So I have noticed that over the years at my church, the numbers intensified during that period. And you know, we're grateful for that, simply because if an individual knows that this is the place he or she should be, that's a good thing. Wouldn't you agree? There's nothing wrong with coming together and worshiping and fellowshipping, as well as giving thanks and praise where thanks and praise should be given. And so certainly church is an ideal way to kick off that celebration of the season. Where do we go from there? We go home, and for those of us who have households we have to maintain and ensure that everything else falls in line, we begin the arduous hours of preparing this meal. And believe me, fellow Toastmasters and guests, it's no common meal. It's definitely no common meal. We prepare the 7, the 8, and possibly the 9 type course meals for our families, where we take all precaution to ensure that everything is scrumptious, everything is tasty, everything just makes you want to have more than you should. A little footnote here, a lot of us do indulge in more than we should, but it comes around once a year and it incorporates our families, sometimes immediate families, sometimes extended families. It is a generally happy time. And in this world, we never know when we're going to be thrown a curveball. And so I would admonish all of us, whenever there is an opportunity to be happy, be happy. Not at somebody else's expense, mind you, but generally be happy, because there are going to be times when we're possibly not as happy as we'd like to be. So take advantage of sitting around the table with the children, the in-laws, the parents, the cousins, bring everybody in and have a good time. Once we would have had the meal, well, here in the Bahamas, there's a term we use that we call niggeritis. And though you may not be able to relate to it, I'm going to give you its definition. Niggeritis is when you would have consumed so much food that the only thing left to do is sleep. And so you've been given an additional word, though not in the lexicologist or word master session. Say niggeritis when you've had your Christmas meal. It's when you have consumed a whole lot of food, possibly too much, and the only thing you want to do is what? Sleep. Okay, so now once we would have gone and we would have worshiped to set the tone for the season, then we've gone and we've had our family time, we've eaten, we've drunk, we've had a whole lot of time, not drunk as intoxicated now, consumed beverages is what I'm referring to. We've had a good time, we're happy, we're content. Now we need to burn off some of that food before we have to go to sleep. What do we do? Well, you've been introduced to some of what we do. Most of us do, and we look forward to all year long. we prepare for our cultural festival that we call Junkanoo. Say it with me, non-Bahamians. Junkanoo. Let's say it all together. Junkanoo. What do we do at Junkanoo? Our table topics master showed you a little bit of it. Our president showed you a little bit of it. Guess what? You're going to get to see a whole lot more a little later on. But Junkanoo is a cultural festival in the Bahamas, and we look forward to it. While it is a competitive sport of sorts, it's a fun environment. There's dancing, there's singing, and believe me when I tell you, there is a kaleidoscope of color during Junkanoo. Fellow Toastmasters, prospective Toastmasters, a season of celebration, including worship, food, and Junkanoo. Mr. Chairman.
She is a specialist in the Royal Bahamas Police Force attached to the Forensic Lab. She is also Assistant Superintendent of Police and one of my bosses. So I have to really pretty up this introduction so that it can go well for me. You understand? Please welcome at this time, Toastmaster Sharia King.
The unique Bahamian cultural experience, the one that Bahamian locals anticipate twice a year. This is when downtown Bay Street, Nassau, Bahamas, comes alive with Junkanoo. Mr. Chair, Junkanoo, a Bahamian national festival similar to, yet better than, the Carnival of Trinidad and Tobago or the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade. It's a melody of colors and sound. The pulsating sound of the goatskin drum, cowbells, whistles, accompanied by a collection of brass instruments, creates a sweet musical beat of which you just cannot stand still. While brilliant colored costumes capture your eyes and brings an individual visual enjoyment. The Junkanoo parades take place during the early morning hours of 1 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Boxing Day, which is the day after Christmas and New Year's morning. Although the roots of the Junkanoo parade still remains a long and passionate debate, what is agreed upon is that after decades, this cultural experience have become a profound, entertaining street carnival for not only the Bahamas, but worldwide. One debate says that the Junkanoo festival or tradition got started by a gentleman by the name of John Kanoo, a West African prince known for his outsmarting the English and was celebrated as a local hero. More popular debate, however, is that Junkanoo progressed from the days of slavery, where the Loyalists migrated to the Bahamas in the late 18th century and brought with them their African slaves. These slaves, during the Christmas, were given 3 days off, which they celebrated by traveling from one house to the next, singing and dancing in colorful masks and costumes. The revitalization of this festival in the Bahamas now provides entertainment for many of thousands. With the costumes, dance, and music inspired by a different theme every parade, you would appreciate that preparation for Junkanoo literally take months and bring together men and women of all stratas of society. What is the sound of Bay Street, you ask? I will tell you. I will tell you the sounds of Bay Street. It starts with the intense drum beat of the goatskin drum, that baritone sensation that vibrates deep in your chest. Boom, 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 boom. Then there is the rocking of the cowbell, chiming in that clicking sound. Yes, that sound. Then the percussion instruments, whistles, scrapers, follows with the brass instruments colliding to bring a kaleidoscope of sound. This results in an instant tingling of rhythm that travels up your spine in anticipation of the sway, and the sway will come. What follows next is nothing short of miraculous, a masterpiece of sound blending together to create an infectious melody. This is Junkanoo. This is the sound of Bay Street. Come with me. Come and hear the sounds of Junkanoo. Come with me. Listen, Toastmasters, as you hear the sounds of Bay Street. Listen. Listen to the sounds of Bay Street. Toastmasters and guests, that was just a sneak peek of the sounds of Bay Street. This is Junkanoo. This is the sound of Bay Street, Mr. Chair.
Yes, hey. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, please help me welcome our third and final speaker, Superintendent of Police and also a distinguished Toastmaster, Rostin Morse.
Commissioner of Police, Mr. Anthony Ferguson, during the year 2018, launched a 7-point policing plan. Point number 3 refers to interaction with youths and young adults to heighten our community policing program and encourage divisional commanders to foster greater working relationships with schools, parents-teachers association meetings, and community groups. Mr. Chairman, fellow Toastmasters, and esteemed guests, good afternoon. As mentioned, I will speak to you on a philosophical topic this afternoon, Columbus House Mentorship Program. It all began on Wednesday, the 17th of October, 2018. Whilst assigned to Central Police Division, Grand Bahama District, I was instructed to go to Columbus House and speak with the administrator and ascertain how the officers from Central Police Division can become an integral part in the lives of the student residents. What is Columbus House? Columbus House was formed in 1997 to help care for children who needed to be removed from their families for reasons of abandonment, abuse, or neglect. Assignment number 1 was to liaise with the administrator, Columbus House. There I learned there were 5 boys and 3 girls at that residence. The ages 12 through 17 years. The reasons for them being there, the employee names, the hours of operation, the date the officers were able to go by and interact with them, and some of the topics of interest recommended by the administrator for us to use in our presentations. Assignment number 2 was to create a mentorship program. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, in summary, our motto was treat others as you wanted to be treated. Our objective, to create opportunities that will encourage all to achieve their full potential through crime prevention education, biblical principles that are needed to help steer the youths in the right direction and to bring about the most positive and godly outcome. Our values. We commit ourselves to avoid gossips and to handle all conflicts in accordance with the guidelines of Columbus House and the laws of the Bahamas. Our vision statement. We live in a world whereby we can preserve the past, celebrate the present, and move on to a more joyous future. Our mission statement. Officers from Central Police Station are committed to be consistent with our attendance, positive with our approach, and to be competent to attract and sustain attention. Our third assignment was to create a survey poll to conduct an orientation of the students. May I say to you, fellow Toastmasters and guests, there were 25 diverse questions compiled in this particular survey poll. Question number 25 reads, what subject matter you want me to talk about? Assignment number 4 was to conduct an orientation of the students. May I say to you that on the day of orientation, the survey poll was presented to each one of the students. Assignment number 5 was to conduct a review of the survey poll presented during orientation. And as was the focus, question number 25, what subject matter you want us to talk about? One student said, and I quote, tell us about life in the real world. Assignment number 6 was to prepare for the topic, life in the real world. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, at that point, I saw the need to talk about ambition. What is ambition? Ambition is defined as a strong feeling of wanting to be successful in life and to achieve great things, or believing in yourself even when no one else in the world does. Yes, so not only were we going to speak on the topic ambition, but we look at the big idea. Speaking about the big idea, we look at persons who struggle at an early age in life, those who got a breakthrough in life, they became successful, and the rest is history. I speak about persons like Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's, Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft Computers, Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer that ever walked the face of this earth, Bill Cosby, the entertainer, Martin Luther King Jr., Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, Colonel Sanders, the founder of KFC, and the Wright brothers who invented flying. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, each time we would have appeared and made one of these presentations, to those children, the expression on their faces depicted Christmas in the Bahamas. Then came assignment number 7, and that was to launch the program with members from the Royal Bahamas Police Force, as well as the Department of Social Services. On the 22nd of October 2018, our program was launched. Our program continued until September of 2019, when Hurricane Dorian came along and, of course, created that ruckus for us. In the interest of time, fellow Toastmasters and guests, what were some of the lessons I learned from the Columbus House Mentorship Program? Lesson number 1, you must always push things forward. Fellow Toastmasters, when we are talking about mentoring, this can be scary for instructors as well as those with seniority. But when you are willing to push things forward, it's all about that influx of ideas, that fresh ideas that can come from the mentees. Number 2, focus on the fundamentals. You can ask yourself the questions, as well as your mentees. What are some of the essentials of learning? What are some of the things that you needed in order to be successful? Once that is given or provided, you can articulate that in plain and simple English. Finally, the third thing I learned was to personalize your experience. Fellow Toastmasters, as a police officer by profession, a carpenter by trade, a fisherman by talent, a master of ceremonies by appointment, and by virtue of my second birth, praise God, I am a Christian. Whenever the opportunity presents itself for me to mentor someone, I try to incorporate all of my experiences. And may I say to you that each time I would have appeared and presented, I was consistent with my attendance, positive with my approach, I was able to attract and sustain attention. And the results, it is written. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, we are talking about Christmas in the Bahamas, but it's not just about the food. It's not just about the junkanoo, the music, the culture, but it's what we can do for those who are less fortunate among us. With that said, I rest. Mr. Chairman.
Please join me in welcoming distinguished Toastmaster Darren Frew with his speech, My First Christmas in Newfoundland.
Thank you, Margaret, and hello, everybody from around the world. I was born and raised in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, which is right in the heart of the Canadian prairies. My dad was born and raised in Newfoundland, which is at the far eastern end of this great dominion we call Canada. For the first 12 years of my life, we had Christmas in Manitoba. It was nice. It was flat, cold, but it was fairly predictable. And then when I was 12 years old in 1973, we decided we were going to go to Newfoundland for Christmas for the first time. And we knew it was going to be an adventure, and we were really, really looking forward to it. But it's amazing just what it was like. Back in 1973, the Newfoundland Provincial Tourism Agency had a slogan. They said that Newfoundland was another world next door. Keep that in mind. We flew from Winnipeg to St. John's, Newfoundland on a DC-8. Now, some of you are probably going to have to look that up, but it was an airplane that actually existed and it had jet engines way back then. So we flew on a DC-8, and flying into Newfoundland itself at this time of year is an adventure. The weather there is, we'll go with unique, because where St. John's, Newfoundland is located, it's like a thumb that sticks out into the North Atlantic Ocean. And in December, January, if you're flying into Newfoundland, the weather is saying, okay, fine, we dare you, try landing here. Well, our pilot took the dare and we managed to land at the airport in St. John's. Still the only airport I've ever landed on where the runway had a bit of a bit of topography to it. And back then, when we got out of the plane, there was not a jetway. We had to walk from the plane across the tarmac into the terminal. And of course, when we landed and the doors open, getting from the plane to the terminal was like a scene out of Dr. Zhivago. It was an absolute fight just to get to the terminal through the snow and the wind. But we got there, and my uncle was waiting for us, and we all bundled into the big station wagon and drove from the airport in St. John's, which is the biggest city in Newfoundland, out to where my aunt and uncle and my cousins were staying, a small village called Holyrood, which was at the head of Conception Bay, just west of St. John's. Driving through a blizzard was nothing new for us, again, coming from the prairies. That was pretty much standard issue. But when we drove into Holyrood and came down over the hill, one thing that we noticed is that throughout the snow, there were lights everywhere. And we soon realized that every house, every building was decorated. It was covered in Christmas lights. There wasn't one house that was left out. Every single building was decorated. It might be a single strand of lights, or it might be something that you could see from space. But either way, everybody was decorated. And that made us feel instantly warm and welcome, despite the nasty weather. When we got to my aunt and uncle's house, my aunt and my cousins were asleep because it was fairly late when we flew in. And we got in and got settled, and their home was quite lovely. My uncle was managing the small oil refinery in Holyrood at the time, and the company gave him this beautiful big home to live in. And it was terrific. It could seat, or it could sleep 8 people quite comfortably, except there were 9 of us. I was given the couch down in the basement as my bedroom for the entire time that I was there. Cool, I thought. This is neat. I can't do this at home. Mom and Dad would never let me sleep on that Chesterfield all night long, and I was going to be there for 2 weeks. This was great. So I was quite happy with the arrangements. Until the next morning, when my twin cousins came down, took one look at me sleeping on the couch, and immediately started screaming. They were only 3 years old, and they didn't remember the first time that we had visited. So they ran screaming upstairs to their mother that there was this strange person sleeping on the couch down in the basement. But my aunt was able to get them all quieted down, and I woke up and looked out the window out onto this amazing scene. The storm had stopped. It had gotten much, much better. We had a clear, clear blue sky. All of the hills around the bay were beautiful white with snow. And then there was this amazing navy blue in the water. It was just glorious. And it was a good thing that the weather had turned better, because the first day that we were there, we went to 2 parties and a wake. Now, for those of you who don't know what a wake is a celebration of life for somebody who has passed, usually more celebrating than anything else. And there had been a young police officer who was killed in a car accident a few days beforehand. So the entire town came out to have a celebration of his life. Well, after the 2 parties and the wake, all of the kids were there. There was no babysitter. Everybody was there. The babysitter was the oldest child who was in the room, which turned out to be me. So much to my surprise, I was riding herd over about 2 dozen kids that I didn't know, and somehow I was supposed to get them to listen to me. It worked. We didn't lose anybody, and there were no riots, which was quite good. Later that evening, we went back home, and I was so happy about being able to sleep on the couch down in the basement. That feeling soon turned otherwise, because the basement was then party central. My aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, a few family friends were all gathered in the basement, drinking and having a merry good time, and preventing me from going to sleep. So most of my holiday there, I was sleep deprived, but it was worth it. And then the second evening we were there, we were introduced to an amazing tradition in Newfoundland that may be in other places. Somebody knocked on the back door, and then suddenly a bunch of people burst in through the back door into the kitchen, and they're all dressed up. Somebody's wearing long underwear, another person is wearing a sou'wester and a raincoat, and they're all in disguise. Well, it turned out it's a practice called mummering, where the neighbors will come, knock on the back door, sing a song, do a dance in exchange for some food and a nice cold drink. Overall, the first trip to Newfoundland for Christmas was sensory overload, but I wouldn't have traded a second of it, because nearly 50 years later, those memories are still fresh and they're still precious to me. Merry Christmas, everybody.
The title of Elizabeth's speech today is My White Christmas. Please join me in welcoming to the Ask stage Toastmaster Elizabeth Chan.
Have you ever dreamed of a white Christmas? Fellow Toastmasters and guests from around the world, let me indulge you with an image of the perfect white Christmas in the mind of a 5-year-old little girl. One word comes to mind: snow. While my parents were always bundling up in the cold wintry months as much as they could, I would wake up in the morning, ready to conquer the day. I'd dash down the stairs into the kitchen to see with glee a fresh dump of powder in our backyard. I was excited. Yes, that white, thick blanket glistening in the morning sun was calling for some fun. I'd call out to my parents, "Mom, Dad, can I play in the snow? And they'd walk down the stairs, still sleepy in the eye, and help me get into my winter clothes, pull up my pants, my boots, puffy jacket, zip up, a beanie hat with earmuffs, and finally, whew, the mittens. I was ready to just let myself fall into the pillowy layers and just look up at the sky, let the snowflakes fall down on my face, and maybe open my mouth to see what they tasted like. And slowly start making snow angels, one for each member of the family. If I started getting bored, I'd start making snowmen of all different shapes and sizes. And if I noticed my parents were teasing me from the window inside the warm house, I would pretend it was wartime. I'd do snowball fights. It's too bad my brother was a toddler at the time, because otherwise, if he was big enough, well, the snowball fight would be between him and I. Shh. But to me, a white Christmas was so much more than the snow, even though it was magnificent. It was also about decorating our pine tree. The branches would be laced with silver garlands and multicolored lights dancing in the needles. What made it most memorable for me, though, was every year I would come home from the mall, because there was always a kids station making crafts at the mall, with a cheaply crafted ornament, by the way. We would make out of an egg carton a little bell, and we would just cover the outside with glue, roll it in some glitter, and voila, a cheaply made bell for kids. I would hang this on my tree right beside my favorite ornament. It was that of a bright red sleigh. On that sleigh were the 101 Dalmatian parents, Pongo and Purdy, and in the back of their sleigh were their precious puppies inside a snow globe, and you could shake it and all the snow would be dancing in the water. Sadly, somewhere along the way, I lost that ornament. And over the years, I look back at my cheaply made bell, all the glitter is gone, but that's okay, because by nighttime, it would be spectacular with all the different bright lights everywhere, glistening in the night sky. Niagara Falls is quite the treat. If you ever come to Canada, Niagara Falls for their Festival of Lights, sometime when we're able to. The basin of water, which is probably about 50 meters high, 800 meters wide, maybe more, glowed blue, green, purple into the crisp air. There were gigantic displays of the Disney characters, as I remember, The Lion King, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, The Little Mermaid, attracting crowds from all over the world. My parents told me, come on, go pick your favorite. Go on, pick your favorite, stand underneath it. And they would try to take a picture with their old Kodak camera. Now, was there ever a traditional turkey dinner? I don't know, I don't remember. As a kid, I preferred getting sugar high. That's right. For dinner, the best part for me was, of course, the candy canes, which I would indulge in together with my cousins by the fireplace after we had done opening up our presents in frenzy. And that moment was, of course, special because we would be sitting in a circle, telling stories, maybe looking at each other's gifts. But after the wind down, when everyone was settled to go home, and I'd finally put on my pajamas after a long day, my parents would tuck me into bed. make sure I calm down after such an eventful day. And I would lay there and I would think, this to me, of all the experiences, is that of a white Christmas. And I hope that I was able to make you dream of one too. Merry Christmas to all of you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Hummel, Compassion. Compassion, Jim Hummel.
First, I need to make a confession. When I was a young lad, I was in a place, they call it a fun house or a spook house. And they had things, it was dark inside, and they had things that would jump out and scare you. And I remember there was a room that was on quite a slant, and there were metal bars that you had to hold on to get through that room. Ahead of me was a young man, a child like I was, and he lost his footing and he ran down that crooked room and hit his face on the metal bar. And when I saw him happen, my buddies and I, we would carry flashlights so we would see what was in there and we wouldn't be so scared. But this young lad hit his face on a metal bar and there was blood and crying. And I was so petrified, I ran away. And for that, I always remember that there was no compassion, no respect, no call to duty. Now, many years after that, I was sent to South Korea. It was a military duty, and I was in my early 20s. At that time, South Korea was what we would call a third world country. It was very poor, very poor. And every time I could get away from the military post, which was not my favorite place at all, I found some Americans in the capital city there of Seoul, Korea. In one family, the man, the husband of the family, was in charge of distribution of food, medical supplies to the people in the community and around them. And very close to that house, to their house, was a children's receiving hospital. It was a very small and shabby building. And one morning, the wife would go to, every morning she would go to that hospital, that children's hospital, and do what she could for the children. Usually it was just to pick them up and talk to them and hold them. One morning when she went over there on the concrete outside the hospital, wrapped in a blanket and in an old cardboard box was an infant. And she was captured and captivated by that infant. The next day, she had two children of her own, a 5 and a 6-year-old. And she took them over to the hospital. It was only about 2 blocks away from their house. When the little girls saw that infant, and they described the infant to me, the back of her head was flat because the baby had not been picked up. Its eyes were sunken, the hair was matte. It didn't have enough energy to cry. Those little girls, 5 and 6 years of age, saw that baby and they said, "Oh, Mommy, can't we please bring that baby home?" And Mama said, "We have 4 children in our house. I don't think we would have room for another one." Week by week, day by day, they would go to see that little infant. And every time their father would come home, those girls would say, "Oh, Daddy, can't we please bring that little baby home?" Sorry, Father would say, 4 children is all we can have. After several weeks, the father said to the girls, you realize if we bring that baby home, you're going to have to change the diapers. You're going to have to bathe the baby. You're going to have to take care of that little baby. Oh, the girls could not have been more thrilled than that final resignation of the father. That little baby came home and I saw it not too long after it was at the hospital. The skin still had scabs, but the hair was now combed and brushed and washed. And week by week, for about a year, when I could get an opportunity to visit that family, I saw the girls with that child. I saw the mother with that child. I saw the father with that child. And it was love. And now the back of the head was beginning to become round. The eyes were bright and dark brown. The hair was beautiful. That child was loved back to life. That is when I recognized about compassion. Compassion flowed. It emerged from those children. It swallowed up in love a child that would have died had it not been for the compassion of the people that found it on the concrete of that little hospital. That compassion was contagious, and I caught it, and I loved it. And I am so grateful for that experience. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. May compassion live in your hearts. Thank you.
I'll be home for Christmas, Tom Brents. I'll be home for Christmas, Tom Brents.
I'll be home for Christmas. That's the title of a song. That's also the promise that I gave my parents many years ago. Let me explain the situation. When I left college and my studies to go to my first job in Los Angeles, California, I took my wife and 2 boys from a little college town of 13,000 to that big city. Naturally, we got a little homesick, but we adjusted. And we had our first 2 Christmases in Los Angeles. But as the 3rd Christmas was coming up, we said, we're going back home to Texas for Christmas. I couldn't afford airline tickets for my wife and my 2 little boys, but I could buy tickets on the train and the coach. A neighbor took us down to the Los Angeles train station, and there was a very heavy crowd. Everybody else had the same idea, going home for Christmas. We kind of worked our way through the crowd, and it was difficult. I'm carrying suitcases and my youngest boy. My wife is carrying some presents, and the oldest boy. A young soldier volunteered to carry my oldest boy. My wife gave him to her. And we work our way. They would open the doors to the train ever so often and let a few people through, and then they would close the door. And this process went on. Several times we're working our way closer to the doors. We finally get there, almost there. The doors open, there's a rush of people. My wife and the soldier disappear. But before I can step through the door, they shut. I say, oh well, doors will open again, and I'll join my family. A few minutes later, they announced the train has pulled out of the station. Wow, what to do? I wasn't the only person in this situation. There were about 50 other people that had tickets on that train that were left at the station. I lead that group up to the station master's office to see what can be done. Station master says very little. I could put your wife and son off 50 miles down the line, but I had no way to retrieve them, so that wasn't feasible. He says, you'll just have to go on and meet them someplace down the way. There is a train that's leaving in 3 hours, a very slow train, but it will get you to where you will change planes in Phoenix, Arizona. 3 hours later, we take that train with my youngest son, and I go through the night worrying about my wife. What's her situation? Has she found the soldier with my oldest boy? Also, I had all the money. What is she going to do for money for breakfast? How will she feed my son? I continue nursing these worries all through the night and into the next day. Finally, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we pull into Phoenix. And there is my wife standing at the station with a policeman next to her. I get out, we embrace. My wife explains what her situation had been. She had had to beg, panhandle money to feed her and my oldest son. Well, word got to the Phoenix police, and they thought this might be pretty suspicious behavior. They had an ordinance against panhandling. Policeman came down, she explained her story, and the policeman said, well, I'll just stay here and keep an eye on you. But we were united again. We managed to get on the connecting train and went on to Dallas, Texas. We had a wonderful Christmas with the family. But then it was time to return to Los Angeles. We get to the train. We have no trouble boarding this time. And we're sitting there. And we sit there. And we sit there. The train is not moving. Apparently, they had decided to delay departure of the train so that they could connect with some other trains that were coming in that were being delayed by snow. Okay. We finally get underway and we reach where we make a connection in El Paso and go from El Paso to Los Angeles. We find there's no connecting train there. It seems like the connecting train had all left on schedule. It did not wait for us. Train company rose to the occasion. We'll hire a bus for you. They found a bus and they shoved all of us in there, that cramped, dirty, dark bus. And we started on our 1,000-mile journey to Los Angeles. We had made a couple stops along the way. One of them, we phoned our friend and said, we're coming into the train station, but we're going to be on a bus. When she drives through the train station, she's a little early. Train station management says, a bus coming here? No, this is a train station. Lady, go to the bus station. So she goes to the bus station and we are not there, obviously. Then we call my wife, we call our friend again and tell her we really are at the train station. She arrives and picks us up. And that is the end of our Christmas journey. People have asked, would I do it again? And all I can say is, I've had a lot of Christmases, but this is the one that stands out in my mind. Mr. Toastmaster,